Democrats really have a branding problem and
Sure.
a PR problem. They don't know how to sell their message to people. They're better off telling people, well, you better vote for us because those guys will hurt you real bad.
Right,
And now that they've
right.
hurt you real bad already,
Yeah.
what is their argument so you should vote for us? Because they've been scaring people for all these years, like, oh, if you don't vote for Democrats, they'll overturn Roe v. Wade. And now they overturn Roe v. Wade while the Democrats were in presidency, while the
Right.
Democrats have a majority in Congress, you know. And so what is their argument? I think it's people like AOC and Elizabeth Warren who are
Yeah.
actually proposing solutions that
Right.
should be in charge of what's going on now.
What up? It's Dramos, and this is the recap, of course, as I do each and every week, breaking down some of the biggest headlines from this last week. Now, it's been an incredibly heavy week, man. And listen, I know that I always talk about we all have the right to express our opinion. We all have the right to educate ourselves regardless of what you do for a living. If you are a political pundit or not, each and every one of us in this country has the right to have our voice and our opinion heard, and the right to educate ourselves on all that is going on in this world and to express it freely. And if you watch the show, you know damn well that's what I do each and every week, give you my opinion that I've done from research, right? My opinion that I've formed from research. Now, with that in mind, this week I felt a little weird just diving into some sort of, monologue where I have my sarcastic tone, making fun of things, giving you my opinion. I felt like it'd be better off if we had somebody who has a little bit more skin in the game when it comes to all that we've been seeing, from, abortion to the January 6th hearings and immigration law as well. So with that in mind, I actually want to just bring on my guest for today. So helping me break down these headlines, this crazy time that we're living through right now, my guest is a former congressional candidate. He's also an anti-money laundering specialist. My guy, Hector Oseguera. How you feeling, bro?
Feeling great, bro. Salutes to you, man. Thank you for having me.
Of course, man. And I talk about, loving having you here on this particular day with the particular headlines that we've all been kind of dealing with and uncovering, because you have experience as a congressional candidate, right, on the political side of things. You're also an attorney, so there's a few different things that we're gonna touch on. I feel like from man, the nonsense that's happening in our country right now. So if it's cool with you, man, I just want to kind of dive into a bit of it.
Let's do it.
All right, man. So let's first and foremost start with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. I know you went to law school. You have studied the case of Roe v. Wade and why it made sense, and the idea of privacy, right, and the right to privacy, and all that led up to this landmark case. And seeing the Supreme Court throw all of that away, and then their explanation just doesn't make sense from a legal standpoint. And then now the implications that it could lead to other things. I mean, first and foremost, when you saw this news break, when it officially happened, give me your reaction.
Yeah, man, I was devastated. We had seen the leak come out a little while before. And so
Right.
I think that prepared people. And I think that whoever leaked that decision, honestly, is a hero, because if that decision would have hit without people knowing it was coming, we might have seen real riots in the streets, to know that people's rights are being rolled back 50 years.
Yeah.
And from the layperson's perspective, not everybody is an attorney. They don't all know the legal implications of this stuff. But I knew right away that this is not just one decision. This is not just women's reproductive rights. This has implications for other decisions down the line coming up, that we could see a rolling back of people's rights in a whole bunch of other contexts. So I was very devastated. I think it's probably, this decision is going to go down in history with some of the ugliest decisions that come out of the Supreme Court, like Plessy v. Ferguson, like Korematsu, things that in hindsight, 50 years from now, people will look back on this decision and say this was a very ugly decision, and we hope to leave that era in the past.
Right. I mean, did you ever think that you would come to a point in time in your lifetime that the Supreme Court's credibility would be in question?
Not like this, honestly. And when I was in law school, that's one of the exercises that you go through is you try to read these decisions and you're trying to find a logical reasoning
Sure.
behind the decisions that they come to. It's a concept called stare decisis, which means that we respect precedent. That means if a
Right.
decision was made in the past, your future decisions have to in some way incorporate those older rulings. It's very rare when you get an instance where the court overrules entirely a
Right.
precedent like they did here. And so, honestly, this is 50 years of Republicans trying to push for this specific decision. This is what you see when people, a small minority, is very, very dedicated to getting a specific outcome. And that's exactly what we have here.
Right, right. And you touched on the implications that it could have for other things outside of just women's reproductive rights, which by itself is an atrocity that somebody thinks they have the right to tell a woman what she can or cannot do with her body. But then this opens up the doors for other things. I mean, we've already seen, some opinions about LGBTQ plus rights. I mean, you've seen I can't remember the guy's name, but one of these idiots in Congress tweeted about the idea of segregation being revisited, right?
Right.
And even I personally have not have gone through law school. My girlfriend has, and I've heard cases that she's mentioned to me. But you even have ones that are connected to this when it comes to privacy, what you do behind closed doors, right? And
Absolutely.
there's a landmark case where I believe two men were arrested for what they were doing behind
Absolutely.
closed doors sexually, right? And I think
Absolutely.
that's what people don't realize is your right to do what you want to do in the sanctity of your own home is at risk. This goes beyond the idea of whether you believe a fetus is a human life. This has implications for what you're allowed to do behind closed doors. And if anybody, the Republican Party who wants less government, right? Republicans want
Right.
less hands coming into their home. I don't understand how this even makes sense for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like an excuse that they use because really it ties into the whole religious thing, which is the evangelicals who are a big base of the Republicans.
Right.
And honestly, you're right. This doesn't make sense if you're talking about less government, but
Right.
people have to understand that this is basically about what you are allowed to do in the privacy of your own home. That's the right that is at risk. You mentioned the case Lawrence v. Texas.
Mm.
What basically you're talking about is two individual men who were doing what they do behind closed doors. There's certain states in this country that have what are called sodomy laws.
Mm.
This goes back hundreds of years of like, if you're not just a man and a woman, it's against the law. And that
Right.
could come back into play because of this. Clarence Thomas, he wrote in a concurring opinion. So this is not officially part of the decision, but it touches into it. He said,
Sure.
you have to rethink gay marriage. You have to rethink the right to contraception, which is the right for a woman to even get an IUD or
Right.
even use birth control at all.
Right.
These, fundamental rights of are you allowed to do what you want to do in the privacy of your own home? That's what's at stake in this whole decision. And that's why, I was devastated. I know many people are devastated, and it's something that we really cannot ignore because we're watching your rights, no matter who you are,
Yeah.
come into jeopardy.
Right, right. And then moving on to actionable steps here, you had someone like AOC talking about, different things that could or couldn't be done, right? She mentioned the idea of it wouldn't be the first time that a president has visited the idea of expanding the Supreme Court, right?
Absolutely.
And talked about that the elimination of the filibuster being a necessary thing in order for us to begin to actually allow policies to start passing, and to actually have these conversations and to not just be stalling for the sake of stalling,
Right.
I mean, I probably already know the answer to this question, but do you think Biden is doing enough? And if not, what should he be doing? And Democrats as a whole, I guess you could say.
No, and I would give Joe Biden, the Democrats as a whole, an F minus on this
Mm.
because I'll tell you the secret about this is that the Democrats liked having this as something to scare the voters and say, oh, you got to
Sure.
vote for us because if you don't vote for us, the Republicans are going to overturn Roe v. Wade.
Right, right.
So to them, it's more valuable as an issue to scare people and to say,
Yeah.
oh, now you need to vote for us. But the fact of the matter is that they should allow abortion services on federal lands. That's something they could do today, right now, and it would effectively, not legally, but effectively overturn this decision, because then any woman could go to a federal location and seek those abortion services. They should expand the court. Let me tell you this. When the Supreme Court was first created, there was one Supreme Court justice for every circuit, every court of appeals circuit. That stopped after a certain point. But at this point, if we were to reinstate that rule, there are currently 13 circuit courts. So you can make an argument that the Supreme Court is less than it should have, and you can actually add up to 13 justices. I think that that would be the right thing to do. And the filibuster, they should do that just because it's the right thing to do. They didn't have to wait for this moment. You know, now you have a crisis issue that a lot of people are really motivated about it, but they should have expanded the Supreme Court before. They should have gotten rid of the filibuster before. Now that you have this crisis point, they absolutely should do it. But the Democrats as a whole, you know, the Democrats really have a branding problem and a PR problem. They don't know how to sell their message to people. They're better off telling people, well, you better vote for us because those guys will hurt you real bad. And now that they've hurt you real bad already, what is their argument? So you should vote for us, because they've been scaring people for all these years. Like, oh, if you don't vote for Democrats, they'll overturn Roe v. Wade. And now they overturn Roe v. Wade while the Democrats were in presidency, while the Democrats have a majority in Congress, you know. And so what is their argument? I think it's people like AOC and Elizabeth Warren who are actually proposing solutions that should be in charge of what's going on now.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point that is not talked about enough, is that all of this is a part of the dream selling season that happens every political campaign, right? And I mean, you see this all, like in Puerto Rico, they have the way that their parties are structured. It's not Republican Democrats per se. It's statehood, independence, and status quo, right? And there's a lot of people who would always argue that the pro-statehood people actually don't want statehood because then they would no longer have a party to report to, essentially, right? So it's all just meant to have some sort of brand, some sort of identity for your voters to come and vote for you. And this is far too serious of a crisis for that to be the reason why things don't get done, right? To have these games continuing to happen and this inaction happening. And you know, speaking of inaction, I mean, moving on to one of the other bombshell stories that we've been following is the hearings that are happening around January 6th, right? And again, inaction, which we'll get to in a second. But I mean, the recent one that everybody's talking about right now from this week was that you had a former White House aide testifying that Trump demanded to be taken to the Capitol and tried to grab the steering wheel, apparently, while his Secret Service was driving, then apparently lunged at one of them when they wouldn't allow him to go to the Capitol. You had him being made aware that there were people in the crowd with weapons, and he was okay with that. He said, they're not here to hurt me. So he just cared about himself and wanted them to get rid of metal detectors, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, you're seeing the hearings. I'm sure you've been following. I mean, this week was particularly damning when it comes to Donald Trump. I mean, let me hear your reactions to all that you've been seeing thus far.
Yeah, my reaction is that it's totally believable. Everything that woman said, there's no doubt in my mind that it's very possible that that's true. And, you know, it's very sad because you have so many people that to this day are misled by this guy. And they still believe that the election was stolen, this, that, and the third, all this craziness. So to me, you know, while I think that those revelations are damning, you know, I think there's no worse opinion that I could have of Donald Trump. So that's the unfortunate part, is like the people that you need to reach, they're the ones who are tuned out. They don't want to hear it. They're rather, you know, they'll rather look at something else. They'd rather care about whatever else, Joe Biden falling off a bike or something, than focus on the fact that Donald Trump throws his plates, that he tried to attack his own Secret Service, that he knew that those people were armed and that he didn't care because he knew that they weren't going to hurt him, that he wanted them to hang his vice president, all this crazy, you know, if it was not, we live in a country where if you are a wealthy white man, you get all the privilege and all the benefit of the doubt in the world. Because if Barack Obama had told black people, I'm not leaving office, I'm staying here forever, I'm attacking my, you know, we can't even say what they would have did to him.
Well, that's
you know
a
what I'm
fact.
saying? If on January 6th, it was Black Lives Matter carrying guns into the Capitol, we can't even say what they would have did to them. And so the unfortunate part is that we live in a country where it seems like a third of the people don't care about democracy, don't care if they win or lose an election. They don't care about the truth. They care, do I win or do I lose? And those, you know, the unfortunate thing is like, those are the people we need to reach out to the most, because they're the ones who are gonna either make or break this whole situation.
Yeah, and that's a really scary thought, you know, that they have that much power and that much control merely for the fact that they are white men in this country, right? And to your point, you have on video Republican lawmakers giving questionable tours of the Capitol ahead of January 6th, after they initially denied that and then were caught on camera and now have to backpedal. You know, you have all types of testimony proving that there were all types of illegal attempts to overthrow the election. And then, to me, the more frustrating part, and I would love for you to speak this from the law side. I mean, you have the DOJ not charging certain people when they're not complying with congressional subpoenas. You know what I mean? Like, I can't imagine being subpoenaed and not showing up and nothing happens to me. You know what I mean? Like, I remember the police showed up at my mom's doorstep because she was $5 short on a parking ticket that she had paid one time, right? And so to think that these people can just ignore the fact they're being subpoenaed, that they have implications against them, Donald Trump included, and that we don't have any faith that the Department of Justice is going to take action on this. I mean, can you make sense of it at all from your perspective?
Well, I can, and it's a real unfortunate answer, because when you have these sorts of attacks on countries, when you have the rise of fascism, what those people try to do is that they use the system to break the system itself, right? And so this is how I can explain it to you. The Department of Justice historically has a precedent where you don't go after political enemies, because that's what happens in so-called third world nations, that a new president comes in and they'll investigate the last president. And when the next president comes in, they'll investigate you. And so there's this, you could say, a precedent or a tradition that you don't investigate the last administration, almost no matter what they do. And so when Obama came in, people said, will you investigate the Bushes? He said, no, I'm not going to do it. And now that you have, the only person who probably would have broken that tradition is Donald Trump himself, who would have loved to have them investigate Hillary Clinton and the Obamas, but they didn't do that. Again, following the tradition, they didn't do it. Now that you have Joe Biden in office, they're probably going to be very, very cautious and tread against indicting the former administration, even though they've done things that if it were anybody else almost would very certainly be in prison at this point. You just got to think about a lot of those congressmen, they were asking Donald Trump for a pardon, right? You don't innocent, I don't know about you, right? But innocent people don't really ask to be pardoned. You don't need a pardon if you didn't break the law, right?
Absolutely.
So these people, even themselves, know that they were breaking the law. But when you have the rise of fascism, attempts to destroy democracy, they're going to use the sort of the spaces in the system to break the system itself so that they can get into power once again. And so that's the best way that I could explain to you why there have not been higher level indictments, and why, in my opinion, there probably will not be. If there are, it's got to be that they found Donald Trump's handprints on a gun. That's what it was. Other than that, I'm very skeptical, unfortunately, that we will see justice related to January 6th, even though, in my opinion, it's something certainly that should be prosecuted. And if it was you and me, bro, we would have been, we wouldn't even see daylight again for the next 100 years.
Right. And then you think to yourself, and tradition, I get it, it makes sense. But then it's like, where does this stop, right? Because like, it's if people see all of this evidence, and even on Fox News, like, there was a clip of them dumbfounded, like, not knowing how to respond to what was being said. Like, even them, they are amazing storytellers, didn't know what the hell to say to this. They couldn't find a way to spin it in a way that made them look in a positive way, the Republican Party, that is, or Donald Trump. But the scary thing is, where does this end? Because you've just shown people that now there are no repercussions, right? I mean, think about all the openly racist people that are running for office right now, right? The openly violent people that are running for office. We have set a precedent that you no longer have to hide your hate, right? You no longer have to be crafty about the way that you suppress others, right? You're allowed to put it out there in the open. And actually, when you do it, it makes you that much more popular. And that's what's scary as hell.
Yeah, I mean, we're going back 100 years, certainly. And it was always bubbling under the surface.
Yeah.
But what I'll give Donald Trump the credit for is that he brought it out. And you used to have to, kind of hide what you meant to say. They would talk about welfare. They would talk about other issues,
violence and drugs,
and urban communities, and all that stuff. And now I think I saw a clip of a woman next to Donald Trump talking about Roe v. Wade, talking about how they preserved white life.
Yes, saw that one as well.
So the mask is off now, and honestly, it's like, where does it end? Unfortunately, history tells us that it doesn't end somewhere nice. That's why I do think that it's better for people to organize in their communities and really get a hold of what's going on right now, because it didn't have to be a crisis. And I've been up to this stuff for quite some time.
Sure.
And it's hard to sell people in non-political times.
Yeah.
But it's for the political times that we need your support, because now what are we doing? Now we're playing catch up.
Right. Well, then, right to that point, I mean, what do you say? I mean, this primary is happening right now. We're going to be entering another election cycle, before we know it. I mean, what do you tell people? I mean, especially, you look at black and brown voters, black voters in particular, who Joe Biden himself say, gave him the election. But many feel like they didn't get what was promised to them. Right. And these record numbers that we saw of voters, many of whom were first-time voters, right? That's why it was record numbers. How do you convince them to go back out to the polls again, when none of the things that they have been promised, have come through? And in fact, we're actually in a worse situation. Yeah.
By far. And, the really simple answers that they have to deliver, they have to do things that are going to tell those voters, I'm here and I feel and I see your pain, and I'm going to do something about it. Just in case Joe Biden's listening right now, he 100% should cancel student loan debt. That's something that I think would recharge the economy, because the biggest thing that people really care about right now is inflation, right? Gas prices are through the roof. If he were to put money back in people's pockets, a large chunk of student loan debt is our generation, people who went to college and couldn't pay for it at the back end. Him to cancel that debt would absolutely, recharge the economy and would tell voters, wow, he's going to do something. They should be more aggressive on Roe v. Wade. They've been very, very, I would say, very tone deaf on this whole issue. They should open up abortion on federal lands. They should be really aggressive about codifying Roe v. Wade. There's so much that they could do. They just have to be able to deliver for the people and to say, that's what I'll say to Donald Trump. When he was running, his voters believed that he was delivering for them. If you can't create that sense in your voters, you're always gonna fall back to, well, you better vote for us because those other people are gonna get you. They're gonna hurt you, so you better vote for us. And that's not good enough anymore. So I would say, deliver on policy, make people feel like you care about their issues, and just straight up do something. Don't just fall back into the mainstream political dialogue of, oh, we need bipartisanship and all that stuff, because that is an era that has ended, and the politicians have to realize that.
Right. And I think that's a great point. I mean, and then on the flip side of that, what do you say to the voter, who is disenfranchised? I mean, I know you're big on the local level, community organizing and things like that. I mean, is that kind of where you see the answer? And obviously that's more of a long-term solution than it is, in the short term, at least for some of these bigger issues that we're talking about. But what do you say to that voter?
Yeah, to that person who feels like it doesn't matter, what I'll say to them is that nothing makes the establishment happier than for you to check out of the system and to say you're not going to participate. Because if you don't participate, What
Right.
you're saying is that other people are going to decide for you. Basically, people think if I don't vote, at least I'm not giving credibility to the system. I'm not participating. I don't have no responsibility. But the fact of the matter is, every time you do not participate, you're basically saying whatever everybody else decides is good enough for me.
Yeah.
If what everybody else has decided is not good enough for you, you need to get involved. You know, you need to vote regularly. Anytime there's an election, you need to organize your community, get your friends and neighbors to vote as well. You know, honestly, and it is not a short-term solution. What I'm telling to people is not a short-term solution. It's going to take a long time. But look at what the Republicans did on not a short-term solution. Overturning Roe v. Wade has been decades in the works. And unfortunately, for us to get back, it might be decades of work. And it's not going to be easy solutions. You know, we live in a generation that it's all instant gratification. You swipe left to swipe right and get what you want. That's not what this is like. Unfortunately, politics is not like that. It's going to take 2, 4, 8, 10, 12 years before you see something tangible. But the work along the way should give you some sense that you're getting closer. You know, as you build community with people, you come to find that there's small time problems that we thought were out of our control, that if we as a community work towards it, we could get done ourselves. From there, you build up. So yeah, you know, I know it's not the glamorous, sexy thing to say I could tell everybody to pick up a torch and go burn something down, but that's, you know, at the end of the day, that's not going to solve your problems. What is going to solve your problems is to organize with the people in your community, go to the politicians and say, if you don't do what we say, we're going to withhold our support from you, and we're going to put somebody in power who will do what we want. And that's what's going to get the results that you want. Politicians only care about 2 things: money and power. If you're not threatening their money or their power, they do not care about you.
Right. And those are all great points. I mean, and even you look at the blueprint that Donald Trump has set, you know what I mean? He's basically, you know, changed the face of the Republican Party and basically said, either you old heads are going to come along with the new plan I have in place, or I'm going to get somebody new to run against you. I'm going to support them, and they're going to get you voted out of office, right? And that's kind of what the Democrats have to do. You know, there are a lot of these old Democrats that are sitting around that are, you know, on TV saying all the right things, but don't really care about anything. You know, they're having dinner with the same scumbags that are doing shady things, you know, across the aisle. And that's what needs to happen. You know, I mean, you took it into your own hands as well. You ran against a fellow Democrat, right? And that's what things like that, you know, if you are blessed enough that that's happening in your local election, you better get out the house, you know, or even somewhere like Texas where you have somebody like Beto O'Rourke, who is a credible candidate, you know, and Texas being such the center of so much of what we're seeing, from, man, gun reform to Roe v. Wade. You know, understand, if you live in Texas, this is incredibly important. You actually do have the ability to make great change. Or if you know, in West Virginia, whatever, these states where we're seeing these people not do things right, you have to do what you can and get behind the people who are challenging the status quo.
100%. And Texas is a big one. Texas is a big one. I would say that we really need, because it could be like Georgia, that for so long people thought it was a red state that couldn't be flipped. And, you know, with the right person, maybe with a Beto O'Rourke, you can flip a red state blue. And with all the votes that come from a state like Texas, it would be very important.
Absolutely. And Georgia's another one, you know, with Stacey Abrams there as well. I mean, you know, you have to pay attention to what's going on, you know, locally, and see what you can do, to your point. Now, last bit of bad news I want to talk about, man. I know this is something that is near and dear to us. It affects our community. It's our people. You had this terrible situation where, you know, 51 people were found dead in Texas inside of a truck, an abandoned truck. They were, many of whom were Mexican. You know, obviously these are people coming across the border in search of a better life. And the fact that they are willing to put their lives at risk in that way just goes to show you what they are escaping from, right? What they're trying to get away from. And man, in a country that seems like it doesn't have much empathy for people, let's be honest, people of color, you know, and particularly the notion of somebody who's Mexican, right? That's like this racial slur in this country, you know. And on the other hand, the irony of seeing us sending billions of dollars to the Ukraine and not addressing a problem right here. And not to say that those people aren't suffering, but it just goes to show you the mindset here. I mean, obviously this is something that you follow closely. It's near and dear to your heart. I mean, talk to me about when you see it, your thoughts, and what is the solution that is not being seen or happening right now?
Yeah, man. And when I saw the story, it absolutely broke my heart because you're seeing the confluence of so many different things. This is US policy on an
Yeah.
international level that people are impoverished to the
Right.
extent that they will risk their lives and the lives of their children to try to get somewhere where they think that there's going to be more opportunities, right?
Right.
And again, we're talking about Texas, which is
Yeah.
a place that benefits so much from the influx of immigrants who come in and are willing to work for low wages. We are the people that keep this country running, but
Right.
are always looked down upon
Yeah.
as if we're a burden. Those Donald Trump type Republicans who look
Yeah.
at every Hispanic as a Mexican to them.
Yeah. Yep.
And we're all lazy and we don't work.
Yep.
Yes, somehow we're getting secret benefits from the government or taking over
Right.
everything.
Right.
So it's like it's such a sad place that there's so little empathy for
Yeah.
people who are coming looking for the story of America. I came
Yes.
with $2 in my pocket and I just wanted to work and make my own way and be left alone and not have to run from the cartels. And
Yeah.
there are people who are willing to exploit those people, coyotes,
Right.
the cartels themselves.
Yep.
And it's really sad. And there's no easy solution. I'm kind of like a radical. So to me,
Yeah.
these lines don't mean anything. You could just let people back and forth and nobody will get hurt,
Yeah.
as long as, you have some sort of system that the person's cool. To me, let everybody in, let anybody come in. Everybody's looking for the same thing. Everybody just wants an opportunity at the basic level. We're all human beings. These
Right.
lines really don't mean anything. If I'm here in New Jersey and I cross the river and I'm in New York artificially, or
Right.
you go somewhere else and you're in a different state, these lines were drawn by people. They could be erased by people. And
Right.
we don't really, when it's causing all this death and destruction, I don't think it's worth it. I think that, we could have a system where anybody who wants to come in could come in. And, at the end of the day, that's how it should be. We should be a just, humane country, and we should be willing to extend the same empathy and the same, freedom that we gave to prior generations to the next generations. I do believe in that poem at the foot of the Statue of Liberty, come, give us your poor, you're tired, whoever.
Right.
That's the kind of country I was raised to believe in. It's
Right.
sad that it seems some people were not brought up to think that that's what America is. But, I was lucky enough to be told that this was a country of opportunity. And if you wanted to come and work hard, you're welcome. And to me, in my honest opinion, that's how it should be. And it breaks my heart, completely breaks my heart that people died, looking for that life and trying to escape a very desperate system.
Yeah. And also, I mean, when you think about, you had touched on this at the beginning of what your response was, but we've caused some of the turmoil in these countries, right?
100%.
We bear the blame for much of the instability for these countries in Central and South America, right? And
100%.
and it's only right that we do our part to fix that, right? I mean, especially if you are somebody who believes in stricter borders and doesn't want people coming over here, the solution for you then would be invest in those countries so that those people don't have to flee the place that they grew up in, right? I mean, I don't think anybody would want to flee their home place, to go somewhere where they don't speak the language, where, they have to rely on others for basic needs to be met, I don't think anybody would want to do that willingly if they had opportunity where they came from, right?
Absolutely,
if you invest
man.
in those countries, you're going to create more and more opportunity for people to actually want to stay where they are from.
Absolutely. And you could trace the waves of immigration to U.S. foreign policy in Latin America. We invade a country and the people from that country start coming up.
Right.
What a coincidence. And then it's sad that, you talk to the higher ups in government, like Kamala Harris went to South America. She said, don't come, do not come.
Right.
That's why people don't have faith in the Democratic Party, because,
Right.
before Joe Biden, Barack Obama was called the deporter in chief because he basically had a wall on the southern border and he had the lowest border crossings ever. So, I think it's very unfortunate for us to go into any country destabilize the country.
Yeah.
The people from that country flee because their country's been destabilized. And then we have the audacity to tell those people, don't come here. That's very cruel. And I think it really is something that we need to reverse.
At 100%. And the last thing I'll say is also, why don't we make it a little bit easier to become a citizen for people, right? Like you have people, and I interviewed an artist who she fled, I believe it was Nicaragua. She had been kidnapped and fled, came here, and she pays taxes, right? And does everything like an American citizen would, but she's been here for like 10 years and still can't get her green card, you know?
Right.
And that just makes no sense at all, right? We're making things far more difficult when we've seen in other situations. We saw, you know, the Ukrainians are being welcomed with open arms, right? When Cuba with Castro, right? You know, there was politics involved in that, and Cubans were fast-tracked to citizens within a year, right?
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
So it shows you these things are possible when the politics and agendas align with what the powers that be want. You know what I mean? And that's the sad thing. You are playing with people's lives based upon your own particular political policy.
Yeah, man, the secret of America is that it's based off cheap labor, right? So if you bring all these people in and you deny them certain rights, you create an underclass of people, and then the system isn't invested in keeping that underclass nourished so that they can continue to profit off of them. And that's unfortunately what you see in a lot of these instances. And that's why this country doesn't want, you know, New York City recently tried to give non-citizens the right to vote, and it was overturned, right? So, you know, this country has a vested interest in having a permanent underclass. And unfortunately, Latinos, people of color generally, have been relegated to that underclass.
Right, exactly. That's 100%. Unless we fit into their box in that particular moment, then they're willing to make a concession, right? Now, we talked about a lot of heavy stuff, man. Let's try and end on some positivity here. I mean, you are active. You're in the community. You're still very much active in a lot of the local elections, like we've talked about, that are happening. I mean, you have your own thoughts and ideas. You're well read in all that's happening. I mean, what positive things have you been seeing that you feel like people should know, you know, to keep some optimism, you know, for man, the sake of our democracy, because that truly is what is at stake right now.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. We are at a crisis of democracy. And, you know, it's not a surprise to you that I think that the local is the much more fertile ground for people like us to invest in. And so I'm going to bring your viewers, you know, a very positive story that happened to me personally is that, like you said, like you shared, I had run a campaign against Democrats because here in New Jersey, everybody's a Democrat. There's nothing but elected Democrats. But unfortunately, those are the type of Democrats, those Joe Biden Democrats that don't really respond to the needs of the people. And for a long time, a group of my friends and my activist organizers, we were fighting against ICE that had contracts with the county jail here in Hudson County. And last December, I was arrested. Me and a bunch of other activists were arrested, and we had a restraining order put on us by the county executive of Hudson County saying that we could not protest outside of his house. We were fortunate enough to get the ACLU to represent us. And just a couple of weeks ago, our case was, you know, our arrest was dismissed, and the restraining order was deemed unconstitutional. Thanks to our organizing, we were able to get the ICE County contract kicked out of Hudson County. So ICE no longer detains undocumented immigrants in Hudson County Jail, number one. Number two, the county executive illegally violated our First Amendment rights to protest, and our arrest was illegal based on that restraining order. So I think this is a good story that your viewers can take to show that local organizing really does work, and you really can get the results that you want out of your government if you and your community are willing to get together and speak in a loud and very distinct voice and tell the people in power what you want. Anybody who's interested, just Google ACLU Hudson County. I'm sure it'll pop up on your Googles, and you'll see, look, we took it. We went up against a Democrat. We have people telling us, oh, why are you protesting him? Why are you doing this? These are Democrats. But we had to fight for what's right. And so we did. We were arrested. Not a comfortable experience for anybody who's been arrested. Not what we were looking for, but we persevered. And now we've gotten a very important victory for the immigrant community in Hudson County, and a precedent to say that we cannot have our right to protest unconstitutionally infringed upon. So, that's my positive story. And
I love
I
it.
think that it shows how good organizing can really accomplish certain goals.
Yeah, and that's beautiful, man. And if you just think to yourself, what if groups like yours were popping up all over the country and taking on various issues that are affecting those communities? Think
Right.
about the massive change that would happen, right? It would be monumental. The politicians would have to pay attention at that point because, like
Indeed.
you said, it's you have yours might be one little victory here in a county in New Jersey, but again, that's the power in organizing. And again, if that was happening in every county in the United States where there was something happening, the country would be in a far different place, right? And that's the
Absolutely.
beauty of a story like that, man. I commend you for and not stopping doing the work, after the campaign run and continuing on true to your word and your values, man. So I appreciate you, bro. Always good to catch up with you. Where can people follow you? They can stay in touch with all that you're doing. You want to give away your social links?
Yeah, definitely. Anybody who wants to connect, I'm heavy on Twitter. It's my last name, Oseguera 2020. I'm on Twitter's IG, Facebook, the whole nine. Same thing, Oseguera, my last name, 2020. I'm very responsive. Anybody who wants to talk about local issues or organizing, I'm more than happy to chat it up and help you out.
Dope. My guy, Hector Oseguera. I appreciate you, bro.
Always a pleasure, man. Thank you. Be easy.
Man, big shout out to my guest this week, Hector Oseguera, for hopping on the show. I think that I gave you guys, what you needed. I did these stories justice by having somebody who is truly an expert on all that we are talking about. And man, I really appreciate his profound insight whenever he hops on the show. So big shout out to him and all the work that he's doing, organizing in the local community, which is really, really inspiring. Now, with that in mind, we talked about a lot of heavy stuff. So, of course, as I always do, I want to end on some positivity. I know we need it now more than ever. So let's do that in the form of a positive quote. Now, this week's quote comes to us from Abraham Lincoln. It only felt right with all that's happening in the world right now. And the quote is, "America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we destroyed ourselves." Man, I got chills reading that quote as I prep for today's show because it is so damn true, accurate, and lends itself perfectly to all that is happening in this country right now. Our country is, in fact, under attack. Our freedoms, as we know them, are, in fact, under attack. But this attack that I speak of is not coming from some foreign country, some sort of evil villain in some faraway land. It is coming from our very own doorstep, from the people in this country. Our fellow Americans in this country are attacking each other. We are attacking ourselves. We are turning the weapon on ourselves, on democracy as we know it. As Hector and I alluded to, this goes well beyond just a woman's reproductive rights. This lends itself to opening the doors for many of our freedoms to be taken away, regardless of what gender you identify as, regardless of what part of the country you live in. This opens the doors for many of our freedoms to no longer exist in this country. And it's a very scary, scary moment when the Supreme Court, which is supposed to be politically unbiased, is very much showing you that they are voting according to their own political ideals, religious ideals, and social cues that they are getting from those who share the same values that they do. And that is a very scary, scary place to be at in this country, especially if you don't fit into the neat little box of being a white man of affluence. Very scary. Now, with that said, actually, I know that wasn't a positive quote. I apologize for leading you on, but I hope it was an eye-opening quote that we are defeating ourselves right now. And if we don't fight back, we don't take a stand, we will no longer have this country to provide us with the freedoms that we've grown accustomed to. But thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. I appreciate you. I hope next week is filled with some more happy news and we don't have to cover such heavy stories. History would tell us it's probably only going to get worse before it gets better, but I'll be here either way to give you the headlines. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch y'all next week. Thank you.